Cecil Perdium's rival, the dull heir of Count Perdium and the North's fiercest knight, is confused by his loss. His opponent shows no surprise. He had spent a fortune on a trap made especially for him. Among the wrecked battlefield littered with fallen comrades, the armored knight walks forward. The knight clutches his axe like an executioner, and a man asks whether he is enjoying the view. The question drives the man angry. He shouts, wondering whether Cecil is acting on purpose. The fallen opponent argues that the trap could not exist unless his foe had known the plan in advance. Cecil then reveals that he not only uncovered the plan, but also learned the enemy army's size and the locations of its spies. He also knew about the support troops that delivered supplies to everyone. Those revelations are difficult to accept because the secrets had never been revealed before. He cannot believe that a weak boy uncovered all his schemes. Before he finishes his insults, the warrior's face is struck by the sole of Cecil's boot. The knight, impatient for the man's compliance, tells him to be quiet. He throws his helmet aside and declares that he can be attacked as many times as they want. He declares that he will win every future war and asks his foe if he knows why. Before the foe can answer, the boy replies that it is because he always has a plan. A year earlier, life continued as usual in Perdium's lands, within the kingdom of Lethania. That was the moment the boy finally woke up. The boy, still bewildered, stared at his own hands, unable to understand what was happening. The biggest shock was not the bed, it was realizing that he was still alive. Survival should have been impossible, because the boy was certain of what had just happened moments earlier. He remembered the massive clash of swords and the crushing force of the blow. That final push came at a steep price, as all his wounds gave way at once. That was a rough ending. His opponent declared the battle over, announcing that the king of mercenaries had fallen. That defeat marked the war's end. The opponent was Aiden, a knight and one of the 7 most powerful men on the continent. Pointing his sword at him, Aiden asked whether he had any last words. Cecil admitted that his only regret was never being able to finish his revenge. Aiden answered with a mocking grin, calling him nothing but an ignorant fool. Aiden knew the mercenary was the heir of the fallen Perdium house. Aiden had heard that he abandoned the land after his sister died. That intrigued him, and he asked how a noble from another land could know such secrets. Furthermore, Aiden confessed that he had teamed up with Duke Delphine to destroy the Perdium family. That shocking revelation overwhelmed the protagonist with stress. He never imagined that a noble conspiracy had been plotted to bring him down. The plot was not just the Duke's doing, it involved a broad collaboration among the nobles. Aiden told him that it would be a waste of time to explain everything to someone about to die. The assassin intended to put a definitive end to the story. However, those few words sparked his spirit anew. Ignoring the threats, Aiden remarked that dying might let the boy do as he pleased before a swift execution. He now remembers being just a head shorter minutes earlier, but now his neck is fully intact. His thoughts are hazy as he leans over a wooden barrel, wondering if his death was just a vivid illusion. He also notices that he looks much younger and starts suspecting that he may have been captured by mages. He decides to make those arrogant fools regret what they did just as someone else enters the tent. Time for some payback. A familiar voice asks what happened to the young master. It is Ricardo, a soldier from his household. Ricardo notes that the young master is already awake and asks whether he plans to leave now. The boy suddenly points a sword at the soldier's throat, warning that he will live only if he answers every question. He makes it clear that the soldier must be completely truthful. For a moment, the soldier looks genuinely worried, distressed by the intense gaze. The worry fades quickly as Ricardo stops taking the threat seriously, calling the behavior over the top. Pushing the boy aside with a forceful strike, the soldier claims the boy simply fell asleep after throwing a massive tantrum. Touching his own neck to check for scratches, Ricardo asks whether the boy has forgotten everything. Ricardo reminds the boy that he insisted on leading the attack against the orcs, leaving him increasingly confused. He could not believe that he had thrown such an absurd tantrum. Ricardo tells him to gather his things quickly, saying that he will wait outside while the boy prepares to move. Still dazed, the boy asks where they are going. The soldier replies that they are heading back to Perdium territory. He finally begins to understand what is happening as he recalls his family land and how things turned out. Grabbing the soldier by the shoulder, he begs him to repeat his words. He needs to know whether they truly head to the ruined territory. After their talk, Cecil climbs to the top of a hill to survey the lands with his own eyes. There is no doubt the land belongs to his family, and surprisingly, everything remains perfectly maintained. Ricardo approaches quietly and whispers, asking whether the young master is all right. He warns the boy not to speak of the land being ruined, lest he provoke his father's wrath. Cecil immediately pinches his own cheek to check if he is dreaming. Dream check. As he feels the sharp pain, he becomes certain that this reality is no illusion. Ricardo watches with concern, as the young master seems completely out of sorts. The boy looks much younger, and his family's lands remain exactly as they should be. The realization hits him hard. He somehow returned to the past. As a child, Cecil once resented his family for being poor. Driven by an inferiority complex, he often caused shameful scenes until his family began to avoid him. Eventually, he abandoned his homeland because he could not handle the pressure. Years later, he becomes a mercenary and survives countless battles. He gradually builds his reputation and hones his skills until he returns to the lands that once belonged to his family. But when he arrives, everything has been completely destroyed. That is the day he realizes he has lost everything he held dear. Despite those vivid, real memories, everything remains perfectly preserved. The cherished people living on that land are still alive. He can barely contain the happiness he now feels, realizing it is all real. But the boy's common sense tells him that it is still too early to celebrate. They are there to face orcs, and he can never forget that fateful day. When the Twilight arrives, most of the soldiers from that land will meet a violent end. Cecil wanted to join the soldiers to prevent the tragedy. Supposedly, only 3 creatures had been sighted, leading him to believe he could lead the troops without issue. But reality was completely different, as more than a dozen of those hideous creatures appeared. Surprise overload. They wiped out nearly all the soldiers in an instant. This tragedy happened because the boy stubbornly insisted on leading them. Since those creatures lacked a clear strategy, defeating them was still possible. The problem was that no one would listen to a spoiled boy on the battlefield. Before he could think of a plan, a loud explosion echoed through the camp. Part of a tower was blasted into the air and landed just meters away, scattering debris across the ground. The troops began shouting warnings as orcs advanced into the camp with weapons drawn. He did not expect the event to unfold so quickly, as the creatures charged with incredible speed. Without a containment plan, the orcs began a brutal slaughter of the soldiers. In response to the carnage, leadership gave an immediate order for the troops to form up and hold their ground. Skaven, the expedition commander, shouted for his soldiers to stay calm and take defensive positions. Chaos overtook the battlefield as the orcs tore through the ranks like butchers. The commander realized they had been ambushed by many more creatures than the logs reported. Defeat seemed inevitable until someone suddenly shouted a warning to Skaven. A massive figure loomed behind him, putting the commander's life in immediate danger. There was no time for Skaven to react, so he had to take action himself. He grabbed the commander by the shoulders and threw him out of the creature's blade range. Skaven watched in disbelief as the young master stood on the front lines of the battle. He intercepted the attack with his own blade, moving with surprising precision. The monster barely managed to react before a pinpoint strike hit its arm. Talk about a perfect hit. The troops looked even more stunned than the beast as they watched the amazing hit. The orc let out a furious roar, then its massive body crashed to the ground from the wound. The boy let out an annoyed sigh, frustrated that he still could not tap into mana. He thought things would be easier if he had been sent even further back in time. The boy walked calmly toward the confused commander, who was still lying on the ground. He extended his hand, though the commander had no idea what he was asking. Cecil made his point clear. The boy wanted the right to lead the troops. Skaven steadied himself, thinking the request was absurd, especially coming from such a young master. The commander stood up and said he would not allow it, leaving Cecil frustrated. He warned that this was not a game, and that he could not hand over command in the middle of battle. Cecil recognized the problem, and the boy realized that no one could trust a spoiled kid in this mess. Just as they finished talking, another orc charged forward, ready to finish what the first could not. Skaven, looking worried, told the boy to step back and let him handle it. Cecil brushed him aside, raising his sword fiercely, saying the commander had left him no choice. He hurled the blade so hard at the creature that the commander had to duck. Skaven grabbed the boy by the collar, demanding that he realize what he had done. The commander shouted that it was dangerously reckless, then finally understood the situation. Turning back, Skaven was speechless once more as the sword had struck the orc's skull dead on. The creature twitched, then its body gave out, collapsing lifelessly. What a clean finish. Skaven tried to figure out how the boy could hit such a vital spot so easily. Talk about precision. Cecil returned to the commander and asked if he knew the most important thing in a fight. The nearby soldiers looked clearly terrified as more monsters emerged. The boy said that no one wins while drowning in fear. One needs an unshakable fighting spirit. He tightened his grip on his sword and charged straight into the heart of the storm. With long strides, he surged forward, reaching the monsters that were crushing the army. To everyone's surprise, he leapt onto a monster's head and sliced it cleanly with his blade. Skaven watched from the front and, like his soldiers, was at a loss for words. He pulled his sword from the creature's skull and began taunting the ones still standing. He pledged to finish every last one, leaping back into the fray. He landed precise strikes while effortlessly dodging deadly blows. Skaven wondered if he was dreaming, since he could not keep up with that boy's speed. The only difference was that the commander could use mana, yet this frail boy should not be able to pull it off. Though hard to believe, Skaven could see the boy was getting exhausted. Still, the boy dodged with the tiniest movements, landing single blows on vital spots. He was basically a sword master, even though he had not learned mana yet. Skaven thought the boy might even surpass the current sword master. Mid-battle, Cecil kept shouting that he was just warming up. The taunt worked. The monsters swarmed him, determined to finish him off. The soldiers saw it and wondered if the young master was trying to flee. Talk about a cliffhanger. They looked to the commander for orders, but Skaven was still stunned. The commander tried to understand why a boy had leapt into battle and attracted all enemy attention. The boy grabbed the enemy's focus and quickly started to retreat. His retreat path was odd. He headed straight for the cliff. The soldiers watched nervously as the young master reached the cliff's edge. Skaven finally understood the boy's plan and ordered his troops to raise their shields. Meanwhile, the boy fled from the monsters at desperate speed. He knew that a clever commander would already see what was happening. Cecil wanted to finish the monsters with his sword, but his body was so weak that he was on the brink of collapse. Now perched at the cliff edge, he was sure the family's soldiers would carry out their part of the plan. The boy was surrounded as orcs closed in, but suddenly the monsters sensed something. All the soldiers, shields and spears in hand, surged forward toward the monsters. Seeing that, Cecil gave a faint smile. His plan was finally understood. Now the boy could jump off the cliff without worry, since the soldiers were about to act. The commander ordered every unit to push the creatures off the cliff. The line of soldiers managed to push the monsters, despite their strength. The commander kept urging his troops until they finally shoved every last monster over the edge. The orcs crashed down, their impact shaking the ground beneath. The battle finally ended for the soldiers, and they breathed a sigh of relief. But the commander still worried about the young master. The boy wedged his sword into the cliff wall to save himself. Talk about a dramatic pause. He gave a confident smile, convinced the plan would work. For a moment, Skaven was speechless, then forced a smile. He extended his hand, asking the young master to try and grab it. But the boy had exhausted his strength and could no longer cling to the sword hilt. Unable to control his body from sheer exhaustion, he began to fall. The sight made the commander and his men deeply worried for his safety. After a while, Cecil began hearing someone call his name over and over. He recognized the voice as Helena's, echoing from a dream-like dimension. There, he faced countless memories of his sister, while holding a mysterious mirror shard. He stared intently at the crystal as memories washed over him. Suddenly, she grabbed his arm, begging him to come with her. It felt like a fever dream, delirious, but finally Cecil woke up. Lying in bed, his senses returned slowly, reassuring him that he was okay. He was alive, and that mattered most, even if he did not know how he got there. As he tried to sit up, he recalled how vivid the dream had felt, like reality. Suddenly, his body screamed in pain. Everything ached because he had pushed past his limits. The rustle of him moving alerted someone outside, who entered the room to talk. It was Belinda, a maid, smiling brightly with relief. She set a basin on the table and reminded the young master that she had warned him about the soldiers. Nice timing. He could have handled it. Before she could finish, Cecil sprang out of bed to hug her. Talk about a sweet reunion. Belinda looked confused, asking if something was wrong with the young master. He told her he was just happy to see her again. As his personal tutor, she was always by his side. Cecil always felt relieved knowing she was there. After his family's land was destroyed, she vanished, and he never found her again. He never thought he would reunite with her in this life, but Belinda said they saw each other every day. Still holding her, Cecil decided to tell her everything, asking her to listen closely. He warned her that the Pernodam family was in grave danger. She was surprised and asked how he knew. He tried to explain, saying he had died and gone back to the past. Belinda thought he meant the cliff incident, but she believed the boy himself was in danger since his body was still recovering. She scolded him harshly. He realized she would not believe a word he said. Trying to convince her was useless. After a deep breath, Belinda asked what would happen if he could not enjoy the festival due to his injuries. When he heard about the festival, Cecil grew very worried. Belinda asked if he had forgotten that Helena was eager to enjoy it with him. She said it would be wonderful if the siblings could become close again like before. Then Cecil recalled that there was always a town festival at that time. He grabbed a nearby picture frame and examined it. It was a photo of him and his sister. In his past life, he had not been able to enjoy the festival. He was deeply traumatized by battlefield horrors, but things were different now in this new life. Cecil asked Belinda when the festival would be. She said it was in exactly 1 week. He now felt the pressure of his looming deadline, a specific day that had changed his past life forever. That day's memory haunted him forever. Suddenly, someone opened the door and asked if Cecil was inside. Cecil recalled Helena, desperately begging him to go with her to the festival. He looked toward the doorway and realized the newcomer was his sister. In his previous life, she had died within a single week. When Cecil saw her after many years, he rushed over and gave her a tight hug. Belinda was completely surprised and froze, and Helena was just as shocked by her brother's sudden affection. Helena felt confused, wondering if her brother was playing a cruel prank. While still holding her, Cecil whispered, "I have missed you." Helena recoiled and pushed her brother away forcefully. Cecil felt the sting of the push and thought perhaps she had always been this strong. Helena said she was only there because Belinda had asked, and she made it clear she would not forgive Cecil easily. The boy had no idea what Helena meant until she quoted his old words. Cecil had once told Helena to keep her distance, saying even the sound of her breathing annoyed him. Cecil could not believe he had said something so cruel. He realized he had been truly despicable. Full of regret, he offered a sincere apology, leaving both Belinda and Helena stunned. Cecil insisted he was the one who had defeated the creatures, refusing to accept any claim that he had been beaten. The moment he finished speaking, Cecil felt a strange, violent sensation surge through his entire body. Helena struggled to believe him, remembering that his body had just been carried into the room on a stretcher. Cecil groaned in pain as the two women laughed, but it did not bother him. Cecil realized he was reliving his life, and this simple moment unfolded exactly as he remembered. He wondered why his former self had wasted so much time on such pointless things. He remembered turning down Helena's invitation to the festival because he had an expedition with the soldiers. He apparently liked marching more than dancing. That refusal turned out to be the last time he saw her alive. Later, her body was found torn to pieces. Regret still burns in his chest, making him feel he should have gone with her that day. Just then, a knock sounded at the door. Helena's personal guards, Jamal and Felipe, entered. The guards apologized and delivered a message, but Helena wondered why they were not waiting outside as instructed. Cecil wondered why his sister was supervising the supplies, but Belinda pointed out that he would know if he paid attention. If a noble had to do such tasks, it meant the workforce in their lands was dwindling. As Helena prepared to take on the task, Cecil realized how much he had ignored what truly mattered before. Determined to change, he offered to help his sister, catching her off guard. They headed to the town square for the festival, though the women still worried the boy seemed ill. His presence made everyone uncomfortable, and Helena told him he was just getting in the way. Despite her warning, he insisted on trying to help the workers anyway. Helena told him the best help he could give was to walk away from the square immediately. Cecil knew his sister's body had been found in nearby alleys. She had likely been lured or dragged away against her will. To stop that from happening, he needed to understand what was happening inside the castle. While his sister pushed him, a guard stepped forward to speak with Cecil. Cecil instantly recognized the man as old Fergus, who said he was relieved to see the young master safe. As a loyal knight, Fergus had rushed over as soon as he heard the boy had been beaten by orcs. Cecil asked him not to bring up the subject again. To Helena, that was the perfect opening. She asked the knight to take her brother back to his room, since he had been acting strange since waking up. Cecil thought his reputation was definitely a problem. Talk about a bad rap. Since he could not change much right now, he decided to gather more information. Turning to Fergus, he asked about the castle's training hall and requested to be taken there. Fergus was surprised, having no idea what the young master intended. The confusion lingered until Cecil clarified that he wanted to go into training. Agreeing, Fergus guided him to the building. When he arrived at the hall, Cecil was completely amazed. The whole place was impeccably maintained and truly impressive. He realized he could train there without any trouble. Back in his mercenary days, Cecil had never imagined a training ground this good. Fergus said he had kept the place in great shape, hoping the young master would one day want to use it. Cecil realized that even in his past life, that man still held hope for him. That realization made Cecil feel deeply embarrassed about his former self. He wished the old man could live a long, peaceful life, because dying is no pleasant thing. Fergus smiled at that remark, as if the young master had already lived a long life. Cecil claimed he had died and come back to life, but Fergus politely asked him to stop with such nonsense. He dismissed the knight, saying he would begin his training, and Fergus assured him he would stay nearby. In his first life at that age, Cecil believed everyone around him was his enemy. However, Cecil now sees that he had simply been a fool. He has only a week to put part of his training into practice. The son of another noble family was blamed for what happened to his sister. Talk about misplaced blame. That event sparked a territorial war between the families, starting their downfall. Helena's death was the spark that ignited a major catastrophe. Now he will do everything right, starting with intense training. He needs to strengthen his body, but he does not have much time to explore. At the very least, he must master mana, a supernatural force that lets humans exceed their physical limits. The secret is to gather every particle from the air and compress them into a large orb. Creating a mana core is not the hardest thing he has ever done. No wonder he became one of the 7 most powerful men on the continent. In his past life, Cecil discovered notes that inspired him to develop a specific technique. Cecil discovered he could add more than 1 mana core and was already nearing his 3rd. The secret of the technique is to unite all conditions, greatly boosting his power. However, his body soon gets overwhelmed by the intense pain of the energy transfer. Completely overloaded, blood streams from his mouth and nose as he finishes the session. He realizes 3 is his current limit, even though he managed 5 in his past life. That technique lets him generate explosive power, but it drains massive mana. In fact, that issue caused his defeat because he faced his enemy already drained. If circumstances had been different, Cecil would not have lost the battle. The technique he created had always been unstable, but now it could be useful because time and youth were on his side. Aiden would be the one eliminated when they met again. Cecil would make sure that Duke Delphine and his shadowy allies were completely crushed, no more lurking in the dark. Finally, the day of the festival arrived, after Cecil had spent all his time training. He dressed with a sword at his waist, unlike the revelers strolling around. When Helena saw him, she was very surprised. She had not expected her brother to actually show up. Even though Cecil was at the festival, Helena was sure he was not okay. He told her that everyone in the territory should enjoy the celebration. However, his sister noted that he had been acting quite strangely. She heard that all Cecil had done over the past week was train, wondering if that was a problem for the heir of a knightly family. Hearing that, the boy felt a wave of shame, while Helena laughed at the situation. Helena admitted she preferred this version of him, as if he had returned to his old self. Those comments left him deep in thought about his actions over the past week. He realized his new path would lead to a different future than he had imagined. His actions were already changing how others behaved, yet he stayed focused on his goals. Meanwhile, Belinda was instructing the personal guards to keep an eye on the young master. It would be up to Cecil to act wisely, since he knew the future and needed to adapt as things changed. Whatever happens that night, he is already prepared. Helena is buying all sorts of things at the festival, while Cecil stays alert to his surroundings. She strolls around the square carefree, but the boy remains vigilant. At night's end, she says the event was fun, even though it is the same every year. She wishes there were something new to do, craving a bit of excitement. Cecil noticed the festival was almost over, and nothing had happened yet. He drifted in his thoughts until he caught someone asking his sister if she wanted to try something new. He said a friend had mentioned a weird incident happening in another neighborhood. Helena warned she would blame him if it turned out not to be a fun game, and Cecil watched him walk away. In that instant, the hero confirmed who was pulling the strings. They turned out to be her own guards, true traitors responsible for a massive tragedy. Those two had guarded her ever since Helena was just a small child. Folks used to claim they died protecting her, but the boy realized they were actually part of the scheme. Cecil gave chase, and the guards announced they had finally arrived at the location. They arrived in a dead-end alley that was completely empty. Helena looked around but found nothing. The place was filthy. One guard said things were not ready yet, but he was certain the festival would start there soon. Helena laughed, insisting it was obvious nothing would happen there. After scouting the area, Cecil figured out the truth. It was not a dead-end alley at all. The streets that might have led out were completely blocked, revealing it was a trap. Before the hero could move, Helena grabbed his arm, demanding they leave, insisting this had to be the wrong place. One guard tried to persuade her to wait a little longer, even though she was clearly upset. The hero could not grasp how his sister was so strong and asked if she had been training in secret. Unaware of everything, Helena ran into a guard who was blocking her path. As Philip grew more assertive, the girl found his behavior odd and said they were both acting strange. Benjamin claimed they never intended to frighten her, but they had accepted a very intriguing offer. That is puzzling. Helena was completely shocked, just as another figure appeared on the scene. A mysterious man called Frank arrived, flanked by two dangerous henchmen. Frank announced that the soldiers had completed their part of the plan. Jomel approached him, noting that it was clear they could pull it off. Frank saw that the Count's son was also present, and was sure he was not part of the original agreement. The hero remained calm, while Helena continued trembling with fear. The crooked guard claimed the boy was a bonus prize who had followed them, unaware he was marching toward his own grave. The hero asked if the guard truly believed he could walk away alive after betraying the Count's children. Jomel told the boy to look after himself, saying the two guards had earned enough to retire. They were fed up with that miserable, wretched place that was always poor and under barbarian attacks. The guard revealed they were not the only ones seeking change, laughing at the situation. The man wanted to leave the land, but before he could finish speaking, the hero sliced through the corrupt guard's body. Jomel barely had time to process what his eyes had just witnessed. That sudden blow left everyone in the alley horrified. The hero said greed was no excuse for betraying the hero and his sister. The hero then turned to the second traitor, Philip, who could not believe his companion had been taken down so easily. Desperate to protect himself, Philip grabbed Helena, but it did nothing against the hero's advance. The hero's sword pierced Philip's skull as he fell, writhing in silent agony. The guard's body soon became just another piece of Dacre in that dark, narrow alley. Frank's henchmen whispered, questioning whether this was truly the useless son of the Count they had heard about. Family drama, huh? They did not expect the hero to possess such solid training and combat experience. Frank realized that taking down two guards in a row was impressive, even though they had been caught off guard. Helena remained terrified and asked the hero what was happening to them. The hero held back his words. He was not ready to tell her the truth yet. With a precise strike of his hand, he knocked the girl unconscious to spare her from the upcoming violence. He gently placed his sister's body on the ground and prepared for the final showdown. The hero's eyes glowed with an intense blue light as he faced the enemies. The killer thanked Cecil for eliminating the guards and noted how different the boy was from the rumors. With a pipe in his mouth, the glasses-wearing man asked if the hero had been hiding his true abilities all along. Holding his blood-stained sword, the hero replied that the answer no longer mattered. He studied his opponents, realizing that the only real problem was the man with the intense blue aura. Cecil realized he had to keep the fight brief because the man's mana level was high. While shaping the threads in his hands, Cecil asked who had hired them to carry out this hit. Frank said it did not matter because the boy would die soon. The hero expected no cooperation. Cecil warned that in a few moments, they would wish they had spoken the truth when they had the chance. One henchman prepared to fight, but Frank stopped him, planning to make the boy suffer to drive the Count insane. The assassins believed that the more pain the boy felt, the more repulsive his body would become. The killers did not know that the boy had once been the king of mercenaries. As soon as they received orders, they launched their attack. The hero tossed an unlit candle toward them as a distraction. The first assassin was distracted by the candle and missed the slash coming right behind it. Bad lighting, indeed. With perfect precision, the blade pierced the assassin's head. The second assassin tried to flank Cecil, warning him not to rely on dirty tricks as their swords clashed. Cecil had no intention of letting the man live, and swiftly moved his hand to immobilize the sword. Now disarmed, the enemy could not block the hero's follow-up strike. Another victim had his height forcibly and permanently reduced as the final blow landed. Cecil realized he had to stay alert because Frank tried to strike from his blind spot. If it had not been for the boy's skill, he could not have defended against such an unorthodox strike. The assassin was impressed, convinced he had completely masked his presence. The boy quickly went on the offensive, slashing at Frank's head, nearly striking it. Frank managed to dodge, but he lost his pipe and almost lost his neck as Cecil closed the distance. The assassin counter attacked immediately, but Cecil, now wielding two swords, blocked the blow. Frank said it was truly surprising and noted that if he had less mana, his head would not still be on his shoulders. Cecil was deeply frustrated, knowing he had landed the hit, but his opponent had blocked it with mana. Frank said he had no idea how the boy had learned such a strange fighting style, especially someone so young. The assassin suggested the boy would die that night. Looking confident, Frank said he would not be defeated by someone with less mana than him. Frank declared that this place would become the hero's grave. Even under pressure and all the threats, the boy kept smiling. The assassin grew extremely uneasy because the boy was smiling. Distracted by the smile, the assassin did not see the hero preparing a leg strike. The hero landed a brutal blow to the assassin's face, strong enough to throw him back. Ouch, that must have hurt. Now, with his glasses broken, Frank adjusted his hat and said he would not be defeated by someone with low mana. But just as he finished speaking, he started coughing up blood, not understanding what was happening. The agony was so intense that it knocked him out of the fight. Everything happened so fast that the hero could not pinpoint exactly what had struck him. The force of those impacts had clearly grown enough to break through his mana defense. Cecil calmly approached him, explaining that he had not known his sister had been murdered. Now that Cecil knows exactly who is responsible, he vows to make the assassin pay for his crimes. He began to unleash the power of his third core, leaving Frank to wonder how the boy managed to boost his mana so quickly. The answer came through two sharp, deadly swords as the assassin realized he could not keep up. The assassin struggled to survive another moment, but his efforts were already reaching their limit. The hero kept pressing the attack because it was hard for the enemy to deflect that power. To the assassin, the situation became absurd as his hands throbbed from blocking the strikes. He had never seen a technique like this. It felt as if he were facing a completely different person. Preparing to block another strike, the assassin positioned his sword, but it failed to stay intact. This allowed the hero to land the first cut on that disgusting creature's body. It was the first wound that made him feel pain and regret being in that place. Determined to finish the job, Cecil pushed forward with a piercing attack that was impossible to block. The strike forced the assassin to writhe in pain as he began spitting blood violently. Before the man could hit the ground, Cecil pinned him against the wall with his forearm to keep him immobile. With the situation under control, Cecil said he would continue from where they left off. And the drama goes on. Holding the assassin firmly, the hero asked again who had hired him. Desperate to shift the battle, the assassin reached for a hidden dagger as a last-ditch effort. He intended to at least kill the girl, ready to hurl the blade with lethal intent. Suddenly, the assassin sensed something strange, like an invisible force had tied his hand. Cecil told the assassin to quit the foolish tricks and start answering questions. If he cooperated, the hero might think about removing the sword from his stomach. The assassin realized the threads were made of mana, and that he could no longer move his own body. He had no clue when the boy had set the trap, as Cecil pressed harder on the weapons. Cecil warned that the assassin would remain alive unless his mana core was completely destroyed. The situation became more dangerous for the man because the hero had struck directly at his core. The blow did not just cause sharp pain, it felt like something was burning him from the inside out. When the core cracked, that volatile energy began to spread through the man's body. Frank said the boy was insane, claiming it could cause an explosion big enough to wipe out the whole neighborhood. Cecil reassured him that only those without skill would be at risk, and the hero could handle it without a problem. That was when Frank realized his problems were only getting worse with each passing second. The look in the boy's eyes was no bluff. It was the stare of someone fully ready to end a life. Desperate, the assassin admitted that Count Desmond had hired him. The plan was to create an excuse for House Perdium and House de Gaulle to go to war. Cecil kept trying to confirm the information, even though he already felt he had found the answer. In his past life, Hugh Delphin always left the dirty work to weaker nobles under his influence. The boy asked if that was why the assassin had come to kill his sister, and the man confirmed it. What a tangled family drama. Now that the hero had all the information he needed, he drove the sword even deeper into the man's abdomen. Frank panicked as he realized the boy would not keep his promise to let him live. Cecil found it odd that the assassin suddenly feared death after taking many innocent lives. The situation was already irreversible, and the assassin smiled, saying his death would not change anything. He had ensured House de Gaulle would have a reason for war, and no one would believe a seemingly useless boy like Cecil. Tired of listening, the hero smashed the man's face, telling him that things would be different this time. He told him it would be different because the man had already died once. Everything was going to be completely different now, as the assassin screamed louder and louder. A massive beam of light shot into the sky, while far-away fireworks lit up the night as a diversion. The hero had finally finished dealing with the immediate problems, and the threats were no longer alive. Cecil looked back once more, noticing the trail of blood he had left behind. Cecil saw that his sister was still unconscious, but safe. With no strength left in his body, he let his sword fall to the ground. At last, the hero could feel some relief, but he had pushed his body too far. The excruciating pain from his technique began to set in as the hero collapsed on the ground. He began to vomit blood. In his past life as a mercenary king, using 3 mana cores was easy, but his current body was failing him. He refused to lose consciousness and forced himself toward a nearby building. There, he discovered several abandoned bodies and realized they were other victims of the assassin. He identified the son of Count Diggold and his guard among the dead. It was all part of a larger conspiracy against Cecil's family. Sounds like a royal soap opera. He knew that as soon as word spread about these deaths, a massive territorial war would erupt. Cecil realized he had to destroy the evidence to change the course of future events. With his sister on his back, the hero began making his way home through the blood-stained streets. He was unaware that a mysterious figure watched him from the shadows before vanishing. Elsewhere, the failed assassin was already being interrogated by the nobles. The assassin tried to explain that Cecil Perdium was the reason the girl lived. The nobles found this hard to believe, because the boy was notoriously known for being useless. They considered no intelligence on Cecil necessary, making the excuse unacceptable. However, the assassin confirmed the child was dangerous and completely different from the rumors. As an eyewitness to the battle, he told the men that the boy had become a different person. The nobles began to scold him, shouting about how much of a setback his failure had caused. The impatient nobles wanted to eliminate him immediately, until a commanding voice ordered silence. Exuding a menacing presence, the man asked if the assassin truly wanted a second chance. The assassin promised that he would eliminate Cecil Perdium through a duel. He claimed to already know the perfect candidate, piquing the interest of the gathered nobles. The candidate's name was Cain Loges, a man notoriously known for his incredible strength. Cain was unmatched in brute strength despite his young age, and no one in the north could withstand the power of his sword. Since Cain was Cecil's cousin, arranging a meeting would be easy, and the nobles decided to listen further. The man standing above all others warned the assassin that another failure would be his last. Back at the family estate, Cecil continued his training, unaware that an elderly guard was approaching with news. Training mode activated. Suddenly, a mana thread attached to a sword flew toward the hero at incredible speed. The hero promptly pulled the sword and caught it cleanly in his hands. After performing a few cuts in the air, he realized he was no longer alone in the hall. Fergus was there, apologizing for the interruption because the hero had been so absorbed in his practice. Fergus, curious about the training, asked how he managed to move his weapon with such precision. Holding the sword by just a thread, Cecil asked if the knight meant this technique. The explanation was simple. It was a thread of mana, a skill the hero used daily in his past life. He was not yet strong enough to fully unlock its power, so he used a single thread because of his current mana limitations. Fergus admitted he had seen many things as a knight, but this display was truly impressive and unheard of. The veteran knew the hero had only recently started training and wondered how he was now capable of such feats. The hero asked if the knight brought news, but Fergus clarified he had come simply to offer his thanks. Fergus was referring to the hero saving Helena's life, though the boy insisted he had only done what anyone else would do. Because of the assassination attempt on Helena, the rest of the festival had been cancelled. Helena sat at the table, furious that no one believed her claim that her brother was the one who saved her. She urged the hero to defend himself, but he did not care, noting that people often refused to believe the truth. Belinda was equally enraged to learn that Nina's personal guards were involved in such a plot. The hero had successfully altered a major event of his life and prevented a large territorial war from breaking out. He knew his enemies would keep trying, and he realized he could not persevere alone. He spent his time thinking about building his own force until a maid entered the room with food. The family finances were in a dire state. What Belinda served at that moment was just a single piece of bread. Budget crisis. The hero looked at the plate, confused, and asked Belinda why dessert was being served before the main course arrived. The maid smiled and told him they simply did not have the money to buy actual food or dessert. Cecil was left distressed by the news, realizing the depth of their poverty. Outside, the situation was even worse. The people were outraged and loudly demanding compensation for their heavy losses. Since the festival had been cut short, local merchants gathered in front of the castle gates, absolutely furious. The townsfolk shouted that the rich did not care about the suffering of others. Worried by the noise, the hero went to the window to see the chaos for himself. Belinda had already expected a reaction like this. She told the hero that the people should have seen it coming as well. Many merchants in the region relied on the festival tourism to survive, having previously earned just enough to get by. With the festival interrupted, it was natural for the merchants to be angry, but the hero had no idea things were this bad. He realized that if things kept getting worse, people might resort to violence to solve their problems. He turned to Fergus to ask about the state of the soldiers. The old man calmly revealed that they did not have any soldiers. The few who remained were busy rebuilding after the orc attack. The territory north of Perdium is overrun by barbarians at war, while the east contains a dangerous, monster-filled forest. The land lacks both money and labor, and the hero realized the situation was even worse than he thought. The hero grabbed Belinda by the shoulders and told her he needed to speak with her urgently. He knew she managed his allowance and suggested using that money to calm the merchants. However, she revealed that he was not receiving an allowance at all. The hero asked why that was, struggling to understand how his own finances had been completely cut off. She explained that his benefit was cut off because he kept wasting his money. The boy suddenly realized he was broke and rushed to ask her for a loan. But Belinda was broke as well. The boy perched on the windowsill, pondering his next move. All the resources he might have used were either gone or scarce, making it hard to start anything without cash. His top priority became gathering resources. While the boy was brainstorming, a soldier sprinted through the castle corridors. The soldier ran straight to the young master to deliver the news. When Cecil saw Ricardo panting, he asked what had made him rush. The soldier reported the bad news. A man named Cain was after him. For a brief moment, the boy tried to remember who Cain was. Meanwhile, the guard commander was enduring a brutal beating. The attacker displayed total contempt for the commander of the regional army. The final blow was so strong it crushed the commander's armor just as the boy arrived. Seeing the chaos, Cecil decided he would not let it go on. In that instant, Cain realized the one he had been hunting finally showed up. Facing the boy, Cain tried to intimidate him with a false, friendly grin. He greeted his cousin, whom he had not seen in ages. Even after all that, Cecil felt no fear. The boy finally remembered that the man was Cain Loges, heir of Count Loges and a former ally of his family. In earlier days, Cain had been both his closest friend and his fiercest enemy. Cain walked toward the boy calmly, stepping over the fallen soldier's body as if it were nothing. Talk about a dramatic entrance. Cecil asked Ricardo what had happened. Ricardo explained they had come because of a public promotion, and there they encountered Cain with a companion. One of Cain's guards stayed by his side as they began questioning the rumors about the young master. Scaven tried to explain, but Cain suddenly grabbed his face before he could finish. Cain believed those words were outright lies, and that is how everything unfolded. Cain claimed his anger was justified because the old man was spreading lies about his cousin slaying orcs. He decided the best move was to help the old soldier clear his head. None of this would have occurred if he had not spread those lies. Cecil soon realized Cain was not there by accident. That was just Cain's nature, always treating Cecil like his personal servant. Whenever he appeared on the family lands, he caused all kinds of trouble and nobody could stop him. Even though he was a hassle, no one ever underestimated him. That was the exact opposite of the boy. Cecil kept being compared to a pile of garbage while the boy stayed silent. Cain was waiting to be attacked, especially after calling the boy a liar in front of everyone. Not long ago, something happened inside the Loges mansion when a stranger arrived with a grim request. Sounds like a gothic thriller. The visitor asked Cain to kill his cousin, promising that if he succeeded, their master would fully support House Loges. Cain said killing that fool would be easy, but as a noble heir, he needed a legitimate reason. The man suggested it would be simple if Cain challenged him to a duel, making it appear accidental. The mysterious man offered to accompany Cain in disguise, pretending to be a personal guard while wearing a golden mask. Opportunities like that do not come every day. Cain never imagined anyone would actually try it. The boy had no intention of stopping the plot against his cousin. He did not care, feeling that everyone was scheming against Cecil. Classic anti-hero vibe. If that was the real motive, the boy was ready to cooperate. He glanced at Cecil and asked what he was waiting for. The boy found it odd that Cecil remained silent, and then told him to bring out everything he had prepared. Since the festival was cancelled, the boy wanted to host a celebration to lift spirits, leaning forward with a mischievous grin. He said they always agreed on that, and coldly asked his friend what he thought of the plan. Cecil stayed silent for a moment, then recalled something and asked if the boy was referring to their past arrangements. Cecil used to be forced to bring drinks and women to his cousin whenever he passed through the city, only doing it because he feared a beating. Cecil was tired of spending his own money to cater to that braggart. Then he remembered that he no longer received an allowance, sparking a sudden epiphany. Before his eyes lay a great opportunity. A chance fate gave him to earn some money. The boy grew impatient and called Cecil by name, urging him to hurry because he did not like to wait. Cecil said it was fine, but he needed to handle something first. His cousin owed him money. This sudden shift confused everyone present. The boy asked exactly what his cousin owed him. Cecil began listing everything he had already arranged, insisting everything cost money. He claimed the boy owed him 1,000 gold coins. The boy insisted his cousin was exaggerating, saying it would not be more than 100 coins. He reminded Cecil that he used to do those things as a friendly gesture, shouting in frustration. Cecil replied that those deeds were not true friendship because he had only been acting. He looked at the boy and said he needed a lot of money right now. Cecil demanded the money immediately, warning the boy to pay up before he was crushed beneath him. The onlookers began whispering as they watched, while Ricardo stood frozen with terror. Talk about drama. Ricardo was convinced the young master had completely lost his mind, as Cain finally rose to his feet. Cain did not like the response, and told Cecil he was fooling himself about his own strength. Cain ridiculed Cecil for his lies about defeating knights, reminding him that everyone in the north saw him as a lost cause. Cain readied his strike at the boy, who waited patiently for the attack. The boy dodged the blow as if Cain were moving in slow motion, leaving the spectators stunned. Cain tried again, but his fists could not connect with the boy. Cecil launched a counterattack, crushing one of Cain's ribs. Cain felt such intense pain that he almost lost control of his body as the agony persisted. Cain managed to shield his face, yet the impact remained powerful. Even after the block, Cecil stayed calm as Kane collapsed, unable to withstand the previous strike. The assassin, disguised as a knight, rushed over to check on the fallen noble. Cecil treated the fight like a performance, urging his cousin to get back up. The disguised assassin wondered how Cecil could be so bold in that situation. Watching the mountain of muscle collapse, the onlookers wondered if Master Cecil had truly won. Did we just get a free gym session? Cecil scanned the room and realized exactly what the group had been plotting. Kane asked the knight if the performance had been convincing enough to fool the crowd. Having earned high praise, they were now ready to shift all the blame onto Cecil. Because of that, Kane prepared to issue a challenge. This was the perfect chance to ditch the pointless alliance his family had with Perdium. After pulling a glove from his pocket, the boy was about to propose a duel. He intended to argue that the way he had been attacked was dishonorable, but he did not finish his sentence. Because a glove had struck his face, Cecil had challenged him first. Caught off guard, Kane was deeply irritated by the sudden turn of events. Cecil said he had been insulted in front of his people, and that he was the heir of that land. The boy noted that one of his knights had also been assaulted, and he would not let it slide. The boy asked if Kane was planning to back out. After burning with rage, Kane fell silent. The man smiled, remarking that his cousin had always been a fool. He never imagined he would dig his own grave like that. He then accepted the duel that Eben proposed, officially sealing their showdown. Kane said he should not be blamed if a boy lost his life in the process. Poor Kane has no idea he is about to get brutally beaten by the boy. Cecil immediately summoned Ricardo to plan his next move. He told him to gather all the merchants who had been protesting at the castle gates that day. There was a great opportunity that could bring in a lot of profit. The sudden end of the festival had thrown the whole town into disarray, cooling the mood. A few tourists still roamed the region, likely eager to spend their time and money. Cecil planned a big event to entertain them, his eyes shining with intensity. Standing atop an arena, the boy was surrounded by his followers. Looks like a concert stage. A duel between him and his cousin was about to start, sparking a wave of bets among the crowd. Outside, the merchants were still selling goods to the gathered spectators. Others took the chance to bet. It was almost unanimous, everyone thought Kane would win. The huge, brawny fighter drove his sword into the ground, declaring that the main character was taunting the holy duel. His opponent warned him that even if he begged for mercy, the sword would never stop. But the main character felt no fear, because he knew the crowd wanted exactly this result. With the crowd gathered around them, the duel could begin, and Kane spoke up once more. He hadn't expected it to become a real wager, so several onlookers asked what he meant. The bookmaker announced that no one had placed any gold on his victory. Looks like the pot was empty. Cecil was not surprised, since his reputation had not changed yet. People said the underdog could never win, and betting on him was like investing in a pipe dream. Kane noted that even the locals were against the heir, so someone suggested changing the bet to how long Cecil could stay alive. Suddenly, a man slammed a huge sack of coins onto the table. He was the commander of the soldiers, and he declared he would bet on the main character's victory. Even though everyone doubted him, his gesture brought a smile to the main character's face. The soldier was not alone. Helena and Belinda also stepped forward to wager on the main character's victory. This unexpected support shocked everyone, especially since the protagonist had just asked both of them for a loan. The townsfolk did not expect Helena to bet. She asked if the amount was enough, while Belinda cautioned her about the risks. The disguised assassin did not look pleased with the turn of events. While Kane claimed it was all a waste of time, the main character finally spoke up. He said that because he was the older of the two, it would not be proper for him to strike first. Even so, he drew his own sword, showing he was ready to fight, and told Kane to come at him. Kane assumed it was just a provocation. As he prepared to attack, he said that no one cared whether the protagonist was older. As soon as the referee started the match, Kane lunged furiously at his opponent. Kane, a mountain of muscle, crashed onto the main character like a falling meteor. Their blades clanged brutally, and the main character had to use every ounce of his strength to keep his defense. That was intense. Kane shouted that there was no need to act as if he had a reputation to protect. With a swift swing, Kane nearly disarmed the boy. Kane tried to strike the main character with a hilt, but Cecil dodged easily. The main character had to dodge the follow-up attack, because his cousin swung the sword like a giant club. The spectators realized that Cain needed only one hit to win. One strike, and it would be over. Cecil, however, did not look the slightest bit impressed by the spectacle. Belinda started to worry and asked Helena if they should stop the match. The assassin knew it was too late. Once the main character's opponents clashed blades with him, they fell straight into his trap. After feeling that destructive power, the opponents grew scared and focused only on dodging. That made them tire quickly, creating an opening that led to their final defeat. The main character kept pressing forward, but Cecil kept dodging every attack. Mid-fight, the main character began teasing Cecil, saying he moved like a rat. The main character tried to land a decisive blow, but his huge attack was blocked. Having changed his grip, Cain tried to hook Cecil with the guard. The assassin was sure the battle would be decided when Cecil was thrown high into the air. There was no way Cecil could avoid the damage from that fall while Cain waited in the arena. Using his mana threads, Cecil said he had planned to take it easy, but his cousin had gone too far. Cecil landed safely on the ledge, struck the ground, and moved swiftly away. He closed the gap until he was dangerously close to his opponent. The main character could not react in time. He looked back, trying to understand what had just happened. He missed the train. The assassin realized that Cecil had used his mana to strengthen his legs, letting him close the distance so quickly. Cecil remarked that his cousin used that crude technique only to intimidate his enemies. He noted that it was only a small demonstration of his own power. Cecil wanted to help him understand the truth, but the main character began to feel insulted by the comment. The main character prepared to attack again, claiming his cousin could not do anything to him. His confidence was sky high. Before the main character could deliver his blow, Cecil kicked the hilt of his sword and neutralized the attack. As Cecil countered, he also managed to slash the main character's arm. He landed several more strikes before the man could hit the ground. The assault only made the mountain of muscle even angrier. Even though his own blows were fast, the main character still could not land a single hit on Cecil. Cecil immobilized his enemy's blade by stepping on it, creating the perfect opening for a clean strike. The main character moved faster than Cain could react, and his blade sliced across his opponent's neck. While his enemy's body began to show all the accumulated wounds, Cecil stayed completely calm. Several spectators watched the duel and were surprised by its turn. It was hard to believe Cecil had improved so much, and some began to think he might actually win. From Helena's posture, it was clear she never doubted for a second. Even the commander of the soldiers began to smile, while the disguised assassin was losing his composure. Cain noticed that all his wounds were superficial, and he realized that Cecil had done it on purpose. He began to wonder when the boy had managed to improve so much, while Cecil watched him with a hint of disdain. Cecil decided to discard his own sword, and he spoke to his opponent as the blade scraped along the ground. Now that's dramatic. The main character claimed the duel would be meaningless because the gap between them was too great. He announced that he would continue the duel, using only his bare hands. Cain felt deeply insulted, but the protagonist decided it was time to teach a lesson to that mountain of muscle. Cain asked him what exactly he planned to teach, clearly displeased by the words. Cecil said that Cain could not withstand his sword technique and began rolling up his sleeves. Sleeves up, fists ready. He chose to fight with just his hands because his cousin always bragged about his physical strength. As extra motivation, he offered to double the bet to 2,000 gold coins if he walked out victorious. To the city's citizens, this challenge was absurd because they did not believe the young master could win unarmed. Even the disguised assassin was speechless, thinking this turn of events made the mission far too easy. He realized this was the ideal setup and felt that fate was on their side. The man handling the bets did not waste any time calling everyone to wager on this new phase of the fight. This thrilled the spectators, some of whom grew more confident in the young master after seeing his earlier speed. Cain felt greatly underestimated, which only made him angrier as he prepared his next move. Cecil assured his cousin that he could use his sword if he wanted, but Cain was now completely out of control. Like a wild beast unleashed, Cain charged at the protagonist with his sword drawn. Belinda was extremely nervous about the situation and hoped the young master would be more cautious. Cain was entirely driven by the madness of the moment, believing he would finally win. Cecil, on the other hand, was certain that his cousin needed an unforgettable lesson. The attack was fast, but not enough to hit the main character. He used the opening to move closer and closer. His steps in the arena were extremely light, allowing him to surprise his cousin with ease. Sneaky, huh? The main character struck his opponent every time an opening appeared, refusing to hold back. He landed a powerful punch through his cousin's jaw, delivering a devastating impact. Kane's head was thrown backward, almost knocked off his own body by the force of the strike. Trying to recover from that blow, Kane had to lean on the ground, completely disoriented and heavily injured. He could not understand how his opponent was moving faster than him, paralyzed by the main character's speed. Like a cheetah. Now that the giant had been brought down by sheer force, the people were amazed at the young master's skill. The main character ordered the mountain of muscle to get back up, saying they were only just getting started. Once again, Kane was consumed with rage, and charged like a furious beast toward the main character. He tried to unleash every sword move he had ever learned, but none of them landed. He began to think that the main character did not even have the courage to look him in the eyes during the struggle. The same boy was now beating him down with brutal efficiency and relentless force. The fight turned violent as the main character landed more punishing blows, leaving Kane completely disfigured. The main character grabbed the mountain of muscle by the hair and lifted his bloodied face. He told Kane that he felt sorry for his cousin's father, the Count. The Count was one of the few who helped the Pernium family when they were on the verge of ruin. The noble gesture of the father stood in stark contrast to the main character's cold demeanor, awakening suppressed memories. A few years ago, the boy questioned his father about why he continued to send aid to the Pernium family during such difficult times. He could not understand why his father would risk everything for a friendship when the territory seemed doomed. The boy tried to convince the Count not to go, as his father was the only noble still offering assistance. Family drama. The Count explained that there was nothing special about it, they were just friends. The memory rushed back as he lifted his hand to strike once more. Unlike before, Kane simply closed his eyes and did not react, waiting for a blow that never arrived. Cecil hovered above him, hoping that Kane had finally learned his lesson. He extended his hand to help his cousin up. Kane stared at the offer, realizing he had been utterly defeated. Kane announced his defeat to everyone, officially ending the duel. The crowd was stunned by the turn of events, and his victory was celebrated. Helena, Belinda, and the soldiers cheered the unlikely win. At the same moment, the disguised assassin charged toward Kane, clearly furious. Kane turned his face away and told the man that he had no further business with him, ending their alliance immediately. The assassin's anger grew as he watched himself being dismissed. That is when Cecil stepped forward to confront the man. Cecil clearly had business to settle, though the assassin had no idea what he meant. Speaking loudly enough for all to hear, Cecil announced that he would buy drinks and food for everyone in Kane's place. The man was mortified, calling the offer ridiculous and demanding that it be withdrawn immediately. He grabbed the assassin by the shoulder, because the man still did not grasp the seriousness of his situation. Cecil told him that this was his debt for losing the duel, a total of 3,000 gold coins that could not be ignored. Cecil used his full persuasive power, urging the man not to try escaping without paying. The assassin realized his situation had become tangled. Once he agreed, Cecil left the arena. The next day, he placed a massive chest on the table in his room, unable to believe his luck. Talk about a treasure trove, right? When he opened the chest, he saw it overflowing with gold coins. That amount could fund a small mercenary army, but he knew time was not on his side. Belinda and Helena watched with keen interest, making him feel uneasy. He asked what they wanted, his eyes narrowing suspiciously. Helena wanted to know what her brother planned to do with all that money. He asked if she wanted a share, but she said she was only asking a question. Belinda said the answer was obvious, believing she knew how he would spend his fortune. Amelia's birthday was near, and she imagined he had done all this to buy her an extravagant gift. While the two girls argued about his spending, he stayed focused on his own plans. He stayed silent as they bickered, unaware that he even had a fiancée. Belinda told him not to act shy, thinking he was just pretending to have memory loss. Helena reminded him that his fiancée was the daughter of Count Leopold, and everything suddenly clicked for him. He knew exactly who she was, Amelia Leopold. Though her people praised her humble demeanor, it was a facade. Beneath her sweet exterior, she would soon be labeled a witch for leading a rebellion and allying with Count Delphine. He saw her as nothing but a traitor, yet recognized the opportunities this knowledge offered. A dark smile spread across his face as he contemplated his next move. He asked Belinda when her father would return, and she said maybe another week. He stood up, noting that a week gave him plenty of time to visit the Lappold lands. When Belinda asked why he left early, he admitted that he was going to secure more money. Meanwhile, in the Lappold lands, a spider landed on Amelia's face as she tended to a group of poor citizens. Talk about a sticky situation. Definitely not the kind of face mask she was hoping for. She placed a pair of shoes on the ground and asked a disheveled child to put them on. The child felt embarrassed, but she insisted that no one in her lands should walk barefoot. She ordered her guards to provide food and shelter for the people. The guards immediately began unloading supplies as the community gathered. The crowd showered Amelia with gratitude before she retreated to her mansion. Inside, her escort Knight Bernaf washed her feet while praising her deeds. Amelia noted that her father always used force with his subjects, while her methods proved far more effective. The knight suggested that the people were now on her side, which would help her when the next successor was chosen. But Amelia had other thoughts. Dominating the scene, she placed her bare foot on the knight's face. She asked him what had happened during the duel with the strongest swordsman in the north. The knight apologized, admitting that he had lost the fight. She responded with a harsh blow to show her displeasure.